All right, we're going to dive in and clear up three legal terms that get mixed up constantly: assault, battery, and false imprisonment. I bet you've heard them thrown around, but by the end of this, you'll know exactly what they mean in the eyes of the law.
You know the scene, right? You've seen it a million times in movies. Someone gets punched, and the first thing they shout is, "That's it, I'll sue you for assault." Well, here's a fun little legal twist for you. They're probably wrong. That punch, that's not actually assault, and we're about to figure out why. So, all three of these ideas, assault, battery, and false imprisonment, they all huddle under one big legal umbrella called trespass to person. At its heart, this is the core principle that protects our bodies and our freedom from any direct, and this part is super important, intentional meddling.
Okay, first up, let's talk about battery. This is the one that's all about actual physical contact. It's often what people really mean when they mistakenly yell assault. Think of it like a recipe. For an act to legally count as battery, you need three key ingredients and you need all of them. First, there has to be some use of force. Second, it has to be intentional, not just some clumsy accident. And third, there can't be any lawful reason for it. You got to tick all three boxes.
Now, here's the part that surprises almost everyone. To be a battery, you don't actually need to be hurt. The law isn't really concerned with whether you got a bruise or a broken bone. It's about the unwanted touch itself. A simple push, or even something like pulling a chair out from under someone as a prank, that counts. Why? Because intentional force was applied without a good reason.
And that idea of intention is just crucial. There's a classic old case called Stanley v. Powell that explains it perfectly. So you've got a hunting party, and a man fires his gun, but the bullet hits a tree, ricochets off at a wild angle, and accidentally hits someone else. The court looked at it and said, hey, there was no intention to hit that person. It was a complete accident. No intention means no battery. Okay, so if battery is the actual unwanted touch, the hit, then what in the world is assault? Well, it's all about the threat of that touch.
And this lays it out so clearly, right? Battery is the moment of impact. The act is done. Assault is everything that happens in that heart-pounding second before the impact. It's the action that puts someone in fear that a battery is about to happen, like right now. So here's the formal definition, and the two words to really focus on are reasonable apprehension. This doesn't just mean you felt scared. The law kind of steps back and asks, would an ordinary, reasonable person in your exact shoes have felt that same fear?
Which, of course, brings us to the next big question. What makes a fear legally reasonable? Well, it all boils down to a pretty simple test. Does the person making the threat actually look like they can carry it out?
Let's make this super clear. If a 5-year-old yells they're going to beat you up, you probably don't feel a reasonable fear because, they just don't have the ability. But if a large, angry person clenches their fists and starts walking toward you, well, the ability to cause harm is definitely there. That creates a reasonable fear, and that is assault.
This whole idea is shown perfectly in the case Stevens versus Myers. Imagine a really tense meeting. A guy gets so angry he stands up and starts moving toward the chairman with his fist raised, ready to swing. Now, other people jump in and stop him before he ever makes contact. But even though no battery happened, the court said it was still an assault. The second he created that reasonable fear of being hit, the assault was already complete. All right, we've covered the act and the threat. Our third and final concept shifts gears a little bit, away from physical harm and toward the protection of our liberty: false imprisonment. So, false imprisonment seems pretty simple on the surface. It's unlawfully stopping someone from moving around freely. But you've got to notice that key word in there, total. For it to legally count, the restriction on someone's freedom can't just be partial, it has to be complete. The old case of Byrd v. Jones is the perfect way to understand this. A man was trying to use a public path across a bridge, but it was blocked off for an event. The thing is, he could have just turned around and walked the other way or used a different bridge. The court decided this was not false imprisonment. Why? Because the restraint was only partial. He still had other options. If every single path of escape had been blocked, then yeah, that would have been total restraint. So now we have a pretty good handle on what battery, assault, and false imprisonment are. But what if there's a really good reason for the action? Let's take a quick look at the common defenses that can make these acts perfectly legal. Right, so there are several situations where these things are totally justified. Self-defense is probably the most obvious one. A police officer making a lawful arrest has the legal right to do so. Then there's something called necessity, like grabbing someone to yank them out of the way of a speeding car. We already talked about inevitable accident with that ricocheting bullet. And finally, there's consent. Just think about a boxer who willingly steps into the ring. Okay, let's bring it all home. Here's the simple, need-to-know summary. Battery is all about the physical touch. Assault is all about the fear of the touch. And false imprisonment, that's about the total loss of your freedom to move.
So why does any of this really matter? Because these aren't just dusty terms for law students. They basically form a protective bubble around each and every one of us. They guarantee our fundamental right to feel safe from harm and to just go about our lives without being illegally stopped or held against our will.
So I'll leave you with a little challenge. The next time you're watching a movie and see a tense showdown or even see a heated argument in real life, ask yourself, was that an assault? Was that a battery? You've got the tools now to see these moments in a completely new and legally correct way. Thanks for tuning in.